to Sophia and Megan in Tech Room. Are we live and ready to go? Just give us the signal and then we'll get started.
We're live, we're set.
Oh, we're live?
Yep, I just started it as soon as you said
okay. Great. Okay, well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Sage Turner, Chair of the Asheville Regional Housing Consortium. I'd like to welcome you to our July 8th meeting. We are all participating virtually today. For those of you who are out there with us, welcome. To help you follow along, I'm going to be stating each section of the agenda aloud as we proceed. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, and you can find that hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. That phone number is 855-925-2801, and the meeting code is 8763. We also have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To do so, you will use the same number, 855-925-2801, and the same meeting code, 8763. But at that point, you will be muted and you'll be able to hear the meeting live. And if you wish to speak, you'll need to push *3, and that will enter you into the speaker queue. Okay, I'm going to go through and do a quick introduction of all board members and staff participating. Folks, if you could just, as I say your name, come off mute and say a quick hello. Karen Keena. We have staff, Sam. Oh, you are here, Karen.
Yes.
Sorry, your video's not up. Okay. Sam Starbaum with the City of Asheville.
Hey, good afternoon. Here.
Jennifer Miranda. Okay. I don't see Preston Blakely.
I'm present, Sage.
Oh, you are. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm filling in for Eric Rufer.
Great. Good to see you. Okay.
See you.
Or not see you. Elizabeth Hanson. Okay, I think I saw John Connett.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Jonathan Jones.
Good afternoon.
Matt Cable.
I'm here.
Emily Brewer.
Hi, everyone.
Forrest Gilliam.
Hey, everybody.
Ricky Hurley. I think I saw him. Jeffrey Adams.
Hello.
Great. Alice Ferry.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, you are here. Great, Alice. Okay. Did I get everyone? Wonderful. We do have quorum today. That's great. All right. So starting off, the first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from June 5th. Does anybody have any changes or amendments? If not, may I get a motion?
John Connick, so moved.
All right. I'll need a second.
Forrest, second.
Okay. I'm going to do a roll call vote by the way I see you on my screen. Let's see. Karen.
Yes.
Thank you. Forrest.
Aye.
Preston.
Aye.
Kate.
Sorry, I'm going to defer to Jeff.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I guess I'll have to abstain since I wasn't at that meeting.
You still have to vote, but you can entrust that we have resolved any issues. So if you could please vote.
Then I say aye.
Thank you. Alice.
Aye.
Jonathan Jones.
Aye.
Matt Cable.
Aye.
Emily.
Hi.
John Connett.
Aye.
Did I hear we were having tech problems? No? Something about restarting the feed? Okay. Background noise. All right. The motion passes. So we are on to the first item, or second item on our agenda, which is the home funding recommendations. And I believe that Nikki, you're going to run us through this. So go ahead.
Absolutely. So at our last full meeting of the ARHC, we asked that the ARHC select a working group to look through the home funding applications this year and to come back to this committee with a recommendation. And the Training Development Associates TDA, they also really helped to facilitate the initial review of the applications. And then we met last week and all reviewed the information, looked at the funding amounts, and had some discussion and came to a recommendation. I will be inviting some of our committee members to really share some of their thoughts about that process and about how things played out. I'll just give a quick summary of where we think we are headed. So I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen. And I'm just going to share the funding allocation, the table that is linked in the staff report for this item. And so this should look familiar. This is really something that we've done for the past few years just to help frame discussion and frame our information around projects and available funding. And so if you'll look all the way to the right, on the right-hand side of the screen, let me zoom in just a little bit while I'm doing that to see if I can just make sure everybody sees that. So I just want to first walk us through the allocation. So our estimated allocation for the upcoming fiscal year is just a little bit over $1 million. We had estimated our program income to be about $12,000, but because that's such a small amount, we are going to hold that and roll to the next fiscal year based on the actual there. So we're just looking at that $1 million investment of home funds for this upcoming fiscal year. You can see that we have defined that out. We've kind of allocated that. Of course, the 15% total reserve is shown there at $151,654. We have our 10% admin for the City of Asheville administration of the funds listed there at $101,102. And then we've also set aside the non-CHOTO subtotal to commit $758,270. So we met with the committee, we looked at those numbers, and then we looked at what had been provided from each of the applicants in this year's cycle. And so you'll see that the Housing Assistance Corporation applied for a project at Apple Ridge, affordable housing, 60 total units. The developer WDT and Broadcraft had supplied 2 applications, lofts at Chadwick and lofts at Swannanoa. You can also see there was those requests there listed to the right. And then Pivotal Development had provided a request for Swannanoa River Village in Swannanoa. So really we're seeing 2 counties represented here, Henderson County and Buncombe County in the applicant pool. So in our conversation, we did talk about project readiness, project merit, and looked at where each of the projects were coming in. I think it was very clear that Apple Ridge was the project, the Housing Assistance Corporation project was the most furthest along. And what we interpret that to be is that they have secured their other sources of funding, and they are really looking for those HUM funds to be the last in. I believe this was a 9% tax credit award. And so the committee really wanted to prioritize this project for funding based upon the overall merits of the project and the project readiness. And so that to me, I think was a kind of a easy decision for the committee to make because this project was ready to go. The committee did discuss prioritizing this for its full funding amount. But I do want to share kind of the frame that we're looking for with the remainder of the home fund. And I did receive an email from our HUD rep this morning. You can kind of see my notes here, reflecting our committee members, some of their thoughts, and where we're landing with some of the other projects. So what was clear with the other projects is that the other 3 projects were early in their process of developing their full plan, developing their full funding plan. I understand that a couple of projects have applied to for low-income housing tax credits, but have not yet heard the results of those. I know we have other funding that has been contributed towards the project in Buncombe County. So what we're looking to do is shape our recommendations this year on designating all of these funds to be used for new construction rental housing, then prioritizing Apple Ridge for full funding, but then allowing ARHC to come back at a later date to define the remainder of those funds and how they would be spent, really pending the outcome of the low-income housing tax credit awards. This approach is different than how we've done in the past. I'll say that in years past, we have just line by line, allocated the entire amount of funding, line by line for each project. In our consultations with TDA, there is some negative aspects around doing it that way. And so again, we're trying a new approach this year where what we're communicating through our annual action plan to HUD is that we are dedicating these funds for affordable housing rental construction, prioritizing Apple Ridge for a full funding award. But then we will have an opportunity at a later date to then make the decision around the other sources of funding. Again, we looked at, Stephen with TDA has supplied other annual action plans that have framed it this way, such that HUD is acceptable of this and allows us to do this. Two, it allows us to really allow these other projects to get further along in their due diligence and in their site planning and in their other funding, such that we can make a fully informed decision versus perhaps picking a project that we would then maybe have to go back and reconsider if other funding did not come through. So with that, I kind of just want to open the floor for a little bit for our committee members to share perhaps their thoughts or perspective, or perhaps what stood out about Apple Ridge, and then just provide any other comment that they would like on the process, or field any questions from the remainder of the ARHC members. So with that, I'll just pause and invite our committee members. So that's Jonathan Jones, Ricky Hurley, Karen Hina, and John Connett. We're all present for our subcommittee convening, as well as Stephen with TDA. So I'll just pause and really invite any of those other subcommittee members to share their thoughts on process, funding, and our approach this year.
Thank you, Nikki. Do we have any committee members that would like to chime in? Go ahead, Jonathan.
Sure, thank you. A quick clarification, the Pivotal project is actually located in Asheville, so it's not a Swannanoa, Buckham County exclusive project. It's around the corner off of Tunnel Road, near the corner of Tunnel and Swannanoa River. And that project, just to clarify, they indicated they were going to pursue tax credits, but did not submit their application by the May deadline. So that was part of the reason we didn't really support that one during the committee discussion, just because they would not be in the running for tax credits at this point, and maybe would be in a future cycle. And then for the other two WDT projects, I do think we definitely interested in making sure that we are supporting local projects, and the county, Buckham County has already committed funding for the loss of Swannanoa, so we'll still be interested in how we can support that one. Again, that's what thoughts I have.
Yeah, I had some questions about that, but first, any other committee members that want to speak up?
Yeah, Madam Chair, just John Connett from Henderson. I just want to speak to the Housing Assistance Corporation project. It is well on its way. This is a project that Housing Assistance is their project, but both City of Hendersonville and Henderson County have contributed dollars to help with infrastructure. So it is a public nonprofit joint project there. Not only is it a rental project, also there's a homeowner component that is funded with additional money. So it is a true multi-phase project. I feel like it'd be good for our community, and it's completely supported there. So the reason I was just a strong advocate for it.
Thank you, John. Ricky, go ahead.
Thanks, H. Thank you. So yeah, I think the TDA analysis that y'all had secured was very good. They did a very good job with asking questions. And I think on the WT projects, there was still some information or some questions that maybe caused us as a committee to kind of like, let's sit and wait, not just because the housing tax credit, but there's some other things like our pro formas, and those two projects, it was a very small percentage of money needed to kind of get them over the hump, or question if they even needed the money when we were going through the numbers. And the other question on pivotal development, it's in the city, but also there was a question about floodplain and is it in, is it out? That could be a barrier if it's in the floodplain. And then back to the housing assistant in Hendersonville, there was other things I think, John, you had mentioned, like it was close to shopping, it's close to places to get groceries and medication. So it had a very good, what I heard, location aspect to it that provide residents maybe very short travel distances if they had to go by foot or car. So we haven't got people commuting a long way or relying on one mode of transportation to get somewhere. So in addition, the fact that they were further along. So I think there was some good aspects of that being shovel ready for this board's, review and dispersing monies. So, like I said, TDA done a really good job. And so I don't think the other three are bad. It just, I think, like we said, we'd like to see if they get this 6 or 9% housing tax credit, help the numbers work out better, and then we'll know where the next step instead of backing up again later and coming back because something didn't get forward. So, and it was, go ahead.
So the WT projects are both 9%?
I'm not sure. I know there was some housing tax credit. Wasn't there, Nikki? Was there some
Okay.
tax credits on some of these? I remember there was some questions about the funding in a
I believe
county.
all three were 9%, or all four deals were 9% deals. The Apple Ridge project has an award in hand. Pivotal, as Jonathan pointed out, did not end up submitting. WDT submitted, but we're probably about a month away from knowing if one, both, or neither of those projects comes out the other end of the award cycle from the state.
So I guess my first comments are that this is a little different approach. In the past, we have gone after like an area and said, let's get behind Transylvania. I think that's what we did last time, as opposed to just splitting it among everybody and saying good luck. So I like this approach of really trying to get behind a project. I'm a little confused by the remaining balance, which could help either of these WDT projects get a stronger application. But then what I'm hearing is, or the committee say, is they did kind of an assessment on their feasibility, likelihood of being awarded, et cetera. And we don't usually layer that in, our personal kind of beliefs on whether or not they might be awarded. So it's a little different for me. Can someone speak to why there wasn't a recommendation to support one of the others with the remaining balance? Because if they're not awarded, the money isn't awarded. So why not strengthen an application, I guess is my question. Go ahead, Nikki.
I'll just provide a little clarity. So effectively, we're kind of talking about two different things. So, I think in one sense, we're talking about what we as the PJ report to HUD about how we're going to use the funds. And that's, to me, a little bit of where we're taking a different approach with this recommendation. So in that vein, what we will share with HUD is that we will be investing home funds into affordable new construction rental projects. And it's clear, and so that's one piece, right? And then that way, that really clarifies the spin down of these funds on that affordable new construction. And that's all HUD that needs to know. And the other good part of that is that we will be able to put that into our annual action plan and then proceed without having to go back and make further amendments to the annual action plan. So just hold that thought just for a second. So then what that does is that we basically can empower the ARHC with making the decisions around the remaining resources. So we already know right now that Apple Ridge is going to be a strong investment, and we're strongly recommending that. But we do hold the option, to come back to ARHC at a later time, and then to be able to program the remaining funds based upon the tax credit awards. What that does is that, again, we can communicate to HUD what we're doing with the funds in terms of affordable housing, new construction. We can then put our funds behind Apple Ridge, but then also come back administratively to ARHC to then fund whatever project that may be successful with tax credits.
I understand all that. Thank you. I guess I'm just confused why we wouldn't also commit and strengthen one more application since we can. But go ahead, Karen.
I guess to speak to that, I can only speak to where my decision process was, as we've all said, Apple Ridge really did come in at a higher score mentally for us. or for me particularly, under the two WDT projects, being that the Housing Finance Agency's tax credits should be announced next month in August, we will have a better understanding. If either or both of them have come in, then we could then come back and identify the 3.9 to go to one or partially fund both of them. But at this point in time, if we dedicate it to one and they are not funded by a housing tax credit, it's a decision because the project won't move forward.
Right. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself, treating this like they haven't already submitted their application. So this money isn't in their applications regardless. So, because they applied in May, right?
Right, and the announcement for the housing tax credit is August.
August, right. So it's kind of moot. And then to your point, Nikki, this is really just administratively easier then, just simplifies it. Okay, I think I caught up now. Okay, anybody else have questions, or committee members, did you have anything to share? Go ahead, Emily.
I had the same thoughts as you, Sage, on that. I think that in future funding cycles, if it helps the application for tax credits, I think that we should prioritize strengthening applications. I understand completely that it doesn't make sense at this point, being that they already submitted those applications for this funding cycle, but I think that in the future, I still think I'd prefer to have make some of these, for us to be able to support some additional projects going into that process where it's applicable and appropriate.
Which really comes back to our timing as a committee or consortium and when we approach this and do the fund allocation notice. So, okay. So it seems like we've got a recommendation from the committee. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to ask of the committee? Go ahead. I see a hand up.
Yes, this is Jeff Adams. I just would, I don't know if it's because we got switched over from Kate to me, but I really don't have the full materials, the applications from the prior all projects, and so I don't know. I got the recommendation, but it's hard for me to kind of compare how the TDA report and what they said compared to the full packet of what the applications say.
Understandable. And this is our first time asking a subcommittee to give the review and make a recommendation. And maybe what we need to do if we want to stay in this kind of process is also supply more information ahead of time on maybe just even a report of a summary of what the committee thought instead of telling us during the meeting, or some kind of preemptive something so we have some time to digest it and give input. Any other thoughts or comments? Because it sounds like we can move forward with this recommendation. It sounds like Hack's project in Hendersonville is a strong one. It's ready. It has support from the subcommittee. It sounds great. It's got all the amenities, quality of life things nearby. Go ahead, Alex.
Oh, Sage, I did not want to interrupt. Go
Oh,
ahead.
that's okay. I'm just kind of talking us through the next points. If you have some comments, go ahead.
I just wanted to second the two recommendations that were made around looking at our timing and, when we can maybe be of most use to these groups. And then also getting kind of a summary of the conversation among the committee members if we continue with that process.
Yeah, I'll make some notes. I agree. And this is the first time we actually haven't been ahead of the application cycle, so this is an anomaly. Normally we would be ahead, and I think we'd probably be treating it differently if we could strengthen one or two of those WT applications. Any other questions or comments? Because we do need to vote on this. Okay, we're going to do a roll call vote.
Jonathan had.
Oh, I'm sorry,
hand up.
John.
Yeah.
Your hand. Go ahead.
And as we're looking at these recommendations with an available balance, do we need to consider what the next steps are for reallocating those? Like once tax credit awards happen, we'll either have a balance or we'll have a balance and need to make some decisions about how to do that. That'll be another application, or if that needs to be a reconvening of this group to make a decision about.
We normally reconvene after awards are made and then if needed, reallocate. But we haven't gone to another application cycle before that I know of, not in my tenure, but.
I think what I would recommend is that once we know the outcome of those awards, we reconvene the subcommittee and have a follow-up discussion. And then the subcommittee will, again, present in a similar format to the ARHC for the ARHC's consideration. So if that feels like a good process, we'll start by reconvening the subcommittee once those awards have been made.
So
How's everybody feel about subcommittee versus whole committee? Are we subcommitteeing ourselves for no reason for us to then get back together and have this conversation together? Go ahead, Forrest.
I think that it's already been touched on, but if we're going to do the subcommittee, which I think has worked well, simply sending out the full TDA packet in advance and probably a week, which I know y'all had to meet last week, but timeline got changed last minute this time, and that's probably only going to happen one time. But if we had a week to see it, to know everything, I think that would help quite a bit. And I guess I'm just hoping that we plan ahead for that. So I'm glad Jonathan asked, so that if we do get this reaction, that we're not pulling together a meeting at the last minute in September or whenever we need to do that.
Right.
But I'm fine with the subcommittee. It seems to work well as long as we got a diverse group that's volunteering, and I think we have.
Okay. So it sounds like subcommittee good, but more information, summary, other reports available in advance of our reconvening. And this is going forward in future cycles, which we want to do, stay ahead of the May application dates, but also in the reallocation kind of conversation that's coming up soon. Does everyone feel good about that? Any other questions or comments around not only this recommendation, which we're about to vote on, which I'll need a motion for, but also how we're going to proceed? So we'll make a motion today, we'll vote. This is likely to move forward is what I'm sensing. Our next meeting will come with some preemptive information of a recommendation from the subcommittee summarizing awards that were made from the NCHFA and possible reallocation of funding. Everybody clear on that? Okay, so can I get a motion supporting this recommendation? I'm not sure if anybody has one drafted, but can kind of fumble through if you need. Hey, there's a recommendation. Who would like to read that for us?
John Conant, recommending the funding allocation to the construction of new rental projects to the Asheville City Council for submission of the FY 24-25 annual action plan for HUD approval, authorizing the city manager to sign all necessary documents to this effect. Is this the right motion? I guess it is.
Yes.
Okay.
And I need a second.
I'll second.
Who was that?
Sam Starbom.
Okay, great. Okay, so now we got to do a roll call vote. If someone could shrink the screen because I can't see everybody. There we go. I'm going to call you as I see on the screen. We now have Ricky. So Ricky.
Aye.
Sam.
Aye.
Oh, Jeff.
Aye.
Forrest.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
John Conant.
Aye.
Preston.
Aye.
Kate. Oh, sorry. Alice. Aye. Abbott, sorry. Yeah, sorry, Kate. Jonathan Jones.
Right.
Emily.
Aye.
Think I got everybody? Myself, aye. Okay. Recommendation goes to City Council. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to the subcommittee who took some extra time to meet and review everything on our behalf and then send along your recommendations. We're all so busy. I really appreciate it, the extra time and effort. Okay, that concludes item number 2 on our agenda today. We're moving on to item number 3, which is an update on the CDBG and Home Annual Action Plan 24-25.
Great, and I'll tee up this too, Chair Turner. So we're well on our way. I think this was one of the final steps for us to be able to proceed with the annual action plan. So that is going to be publicized this week, and then we will meet on July 23rd to have City Council review everything that's been done with respect to the CDBG component of this work, as well as the home funding. So that is timely and well on its way. So thank you so much for that vote. It was critical for us to be able to make our deadlines with HUD. Now, what I had submitted in the packet for your consideration today was an updated recapture policy. Again, this is something that we had wanted to include in the annual action plan submission this go around for HUD. However, I need to kind of walk that back just a second, and I need to just frame that up here from the beginning. So there's a couple more steps that I need to fulfill before we can submit this to the annual action plan and to HUD for review. Namely, it's getting this body to make a policy decision concerning the recapture policy and also reviewing this with city legal. And so I do have a few more steps to take. So while I had hoped that we could facilitate a decision today, I want to recognize that it's likely that we need more time internally for internal review with legal, as well as I want to afford the policymakers on this body to have more time to look at this recapture policy. So again, I think for my purposes today, I had initially framed it in the staff report to seek a vote, but I thought perhaps today we could just walk through the information and then we can allow the committee to sit with this. I can come back to you at a later time. I can obtain any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that today, and then we can proceed. My only other misgiving is that it may mean that we need to convene a quicker meeting of this group. I would really like to have this to be included in the annual action plan, and so that would necessitate that we might need to reconvene in advance of July 23rd. But before we do that, I just want to kind of share with you why this is so important. So as you all know, we've been working with MHO for a while on their down payment assistance program and how it interfaces with the home funds that they have been awarded over the years. And we've had conversations with HUD. We had HUD flag several things that we needed to resolve with respect to the administration of that program. Some of those elements from HUD were certainly on the city's behalf in terms of how we report the down payment assistance program back to HUD, as well as just the overall administration of the program. And most importantly, our policies and procedures with respect to that program. We've been working with TDA for a number of years on working through all those finer details. And this most recent policy was intended to really reflect the partnership that we had cultivated with MHO to be able to provide an appropriate down payment assistance program for our community. So I want to say a little bit about that. I think in years past, we have elected to pursue kind of a single operating recapture policy. This new policy that you see here in your materials also seeks to have different methodologies for performing down payment assistance in our community. And the reason why we as the PJ are kind of recommending this policy approach is really, again, to reflect where our market is here locally and reflect what existing programs exist in our community that we're trying to support with our federal funds. So rather than limit our ability to fund certain programs based upon our policies, we're trying to really open up our policy framework to allow more participation through entities that want to carry out down payment assistance in different ways. So most notably, MHO has been operating for a number of years with a shared appreciation model. So you'll see in that recapture policy that shared appreciation is something that can be permitted as a mechanism to incorporate into a down payment assistance program. I think for me, my analysis of why shared appreciation was worth putting into the policy and worth bringing to the table is that we are just in a very aggressive market where we have very intense increases in our market pricing for housing. And so having a way and a mechanism to be able to capture some of those funds based upon that aggressive home price appreciation is something that often hot markets within the U.S. do in order to ensure that they have viable resources moving forward to grow affordable housing. And so we just have to be cognizant of that in our current market in terms of how we can just ensure that funds will be available year over year to meet the need for down payment assistance. So that was the major impetus with us bringing forward the recapture policy as it is presented to this committee today. And so I just want to kind of pause there to see if there are any questions. Again, my takeaway and my request of the committee right now is to acknowledge receipt of this recapture policy. Please review it. And then I am curious to see if there's an opportunity that we could reconvene once we've allowed for that depth of review and once we have allowed for a finer point from our legal department to provide input. So I'll pause there and see if anyone had a chance to review any materials or had any questions from the outset or had any questions that you would ask that we follow up on in a subsequent correspondence.
Thank you, Nikki. It sounds like either we flush it out today or you need to meet again in the next couple of weeks. Did anybody have a chance to review this? How about that? Does anybody have any feedback on whether, after reviewing it, there were any concerns? I have more background on this, so I know why we're doing it, and I've been kind of involved. Go ahead, Forrest.
No concerns, just want to clarify, would the approach used be determined based on the contract?
I think our intent, and this is always my approach with policies, is I want policies to really help us then take that policy to inform a contract. So my first step was to get this policy shored up, and then after that policy is complete, then that would lead into a contract. And that's the important part of getting the policy right, is that anything and everything we do contractually will be ultimately under the umbrella of the policy.
I guess that makes sense, but you've got three options, and I guess what I couldn't find was the actual policy when I was looking at it, because I think there's that flexibility there that you're trying to get. And I just wanted to see at what point would it be determined what approach, because I don't.
And then
think
you're
you can do
absolutely
it based
right.
on the house,
Then you're absolutely right. Forgive me, I misunderstood the question, but you're absolutely right. So so if you can imagine us having a funding conversation over what programs to fund, just like we did today, we come out with a couple of down payment assistance programs. It is likely that I would expect those applicants would tell us about what their approach through that application process. Then once we make a vote on those funding allocations, then yes, the contract would ultimately then frame the approach that would be taken, and the requirements that are outlined in the policy would then be subjected to writing in that contract.
Thank you.
John Conant?
I just want to support the concept and the idea that we're looking at a similar model, and in the current, as you said, Nikki, the current appreciation in our market lends itself to have this recapture provision that can go in and help fund future programs and future down payment assistance. I'll defer to legal for them to look at it, but I like the concept and think we need to do more of this based on the current appreciation in our market. So.
I'll share some background. This might be like a minute-long statement here. So, City of Asheville did its first affordable housing bonds in 2016, and City Council, I wasn't on council at the time, but set aside $1 million for down payment assistance, and then went into an RFP process to do this type of program, although it didn't have shared appreciation. And what we encountered, and why 0 of those dollars were ever deployed since 2016, is because we couldn't find someone to administer it that didn't have essentially the administrative function in it and the recapture amount. The only respondent to our RFP said they would do it, but only with the shared appreciation model. So we were unable to deploy those funds. And to like John Conant's comment just now, prices have since inflated, so those homeowners that would have been have lost out. Now, on the city side, we have a very flush toolbox of tools, but we often have the conversation philosophically about whether or not government should be the leading funder of affordable housing. Is it our role, et cetera? And what I usually say to that is that the better end that we can get self-replenishing tools working for us, then it's a model we can support. Because I don't feel like in my role as a city councilor, we can continue to just give money, raise taxes, give money for something that isn't building a model that can at some point sustain itself. We talk about that in true bond cycles, where as bonds mature, they can be reused again. But if we do this with a low income or a low interest loan fund, and to me, the shared appreciation model is establishing something that gives us a future replenishing fund. So I'm supportive of it. Now, in the past, City Council for Asheville has not been supportive of the shared appreciation model, but I'm sharing this to let you know that we have actually come full circle as a body and become in support of the shared appreciation model simply because we recognize it cannot deploy without it. It just can't be administered. So, and homeowners are just losing out in the and while we shuffle and fumble and try and figure it out. So I'm almost inclined to just say, let's support this. Let's not have a second meeting and make a motion on it today, but I don't want to rush folks. I know I've had more experience reading this and building up to this. So I'm curious if other folks, do you need more time? Does anyone feel comfortable that they could do it today? Emily?
I really just have a clarifying question, but once I get the answer to this, I think I'd be comfortable making a vote and not moving forward, not having a second meeting. Nikki, could you talk a little bit about why the decision was to not entertain projects making use of a resale provision and instead focus entirely on the recapture? I just would appreciate a little bit of information as to what that discussion was about.
That is a great question. I may have to pivot to Stephen if he's still available to help me out with that one.
Yeah, I am, Nikki, and I've only got a couple minutes before I got to go hop on my flight. But what we were trying to do here, frankly, is kind of go back to the policy that had been in place a couple of years ago. For those that remember, last year, because the resale recapture policy has to go into the action plan every year, and the input that the city was getting from HUD, in effect, was that they weren't going to approve it with the shared appreciation. And frankly, I think that was some misunderstandings on the part of the field office and this, that, and the other thing. And the decision to kind of pull that out, and our recommendation to pull that out last year and only have a sort of straight, plain recapture, as it were, was really a go along to get along. It didn't make sense, in our view, to hold up your ability to sort of fund the next habitat project, for example, that wasn't planning to use that while we were still trying to work through the findings related to the MHO program. And so I think at this point, what we're trying to do is just reintroduce the shared appreciation model, because we're much closer to having, we think, the rest of that stuff resolved. It's clearly permissible under HUD's guidance. And I've had several other clients that have introduced that in the past year or two. And so really what we did here was kind of, try to rewrite to get back, to some degree, back to status quo. There were certain things that on the edges, on some really deep in the weeds kind of regulatory fine points, were not quite accurate in the way that the prior version was written. In terms of the some very fine distinctions between when the program is being run by a subrecipient versus being run by a CHOTO versus being run by a non-CHOTO developer, perhaps. And so we tried to clean those things up as well. And because HUD had, part of HUD's feedback had been, at least at the field office, was they just didn't quite understand it, trying to put very clear examples in that anybody can kind of walk through and see how it works. So again, this largely was trying to go back to what had been in place before. And what had been in place before was the city sort of saying, hey, we're only going to do recapture. That is something that we see, pretty broadly across the country. Most PJs strongly prefer to only do recapture. Administratively, it's much easier than resale. It includes, there's less kind of compliance risk. In particular, in the event that somebody loses a house to foreclosure, we're obligated, and not only are we only obligated to, we're obligated not to try to take more than the net proceeds of sale. And in a foreclosure, the net proceeds of sale end up being nothing. And while that's an unfortunate outcome, at least the city doesn't end up in a position where they have to repay HUD for a non-compliant project. When you're using resale, if the owner loses that house to foreclosure and the PJ is unable to intervene and prevent that from happening, and the house goes back to the bank, not only do we have that unfortunate outcome, but we also now have to repay HUD the entire investment in that project. And so unless and until there's a real kind of need to use resale, If you had a community land trust, for example, it really doesn't make sense to kind of have a resale policy in there just because. And I would say, the shared appreciation in a lot of ways to me is a little bit of the best of both worlds, because the whole point is that, we're getting back more than what we put in so much as the market continues to go up. And in a only recapture the amount given, you might be in a position where you need 2 or 3 people to sell and pay off to have enough money to assist another buyer. In the shared appreciation model, there's not a guarantee that what we get back from buyer A is going to be enough to do buyer B, similarly situated with a similarly situated house, but it's much closer. And MHO's experience, frankly, kind of shows that, where they've been able to maintain a certain level of production for several years without getting huge new infusions of capital. So it's a little bit of I think the shared appreciation actually in some ways is you get some of the best of both worlds. But it was less a deliberate hey, nobody wants to do resale as much as just a continuation of what that policy had already been, as opposed to trying to introduce something new.
Thank you. Karen, go ahead.
This is just, I don't know, just a procedural. I'm not seeing anywhere in the draft that it is noted that these are housing consortium funds, that the home program is through the housing consortium. It appears that it is City of Asheville alone.
I will share that where this lives in its final destiny is our entire home consortium policy handbook. And so this is merely an excerpt from that. I'll see if I can find that and share that out to the team. But you'll see that once it kind of falls within that larger booklet, per se, of our home policies, the home consortium is referenced at the outset. So hopefully that would overcome any concerns there. But I hear you, Karen. Okay.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? Do you feel like we can move forward on this policy adoption today? Oh, Jonathan, go ahead.
Is there, and maybe this is to Forrest's earlier question about when we use the shared appreciation or not, is there any place in the policy we could reference that it's at the time of application, or that it's approved by the home consortium per project, or something like that?
Nikki, I think that would be easy enough to add. And clearly, I think is the general intent. It's not meant to be that, when somebody goes and applies to a given program, whether that's the Habitat or MHO, the idea is that they should know what the rules of the road for them are. And that is something that should be being taken care of ahead of time. And so, I would say it was sort of implicit in the expectation that this is the policy, and that when Group A is funded, part of the funding is going to be the determination about which of these 2 options is being used. So I think that's, just kind of a clarifying thing. It's not I wouldn't think that that's a substantive change compared to what I think we all assumed would be the case anyway.
And would this also be a place to talk about reporting requirements on recaptured funds? And because I really like what's included in here about the classification of receipts and receipts for CHODOs versus subrecipients. I think that's really helpful information. The one thing I'm not seeing is where that information is tracked, or what the responsibility is for tracking that. Having had a little history, I just wondered that if there's some way for us to reflect, we need to make sure that communication is clear. How are we getting the proper receipts from subrecipients versus CHODOs?
Yeah, I agree, Jonathan. That's important. What I would say, though, is that what we're trying to draft here was what the policy is from almost more from the consumer standpoint, in terms of what HUD expects to see in the action plan. The administrative stuff about reporting and all of that is still clearly part of HUD's broader expectation about policies and procedures and would be handled in the contracts as well as in, you know, in the case of, you know, trying to get the MHO stuff restarted, you know, kind of a refresh on the expectations and the format and the frequency and this, that, and the other thing of the reporting. So this was there to try to, you know, provide a little bit of clarity about that because it has been an issue without trying to get into all of the chapter and verse of every little thing, at which point it really becomes more of a procedural thing than a policy statement for the action plan.
Does that work for you, Jonathan? It's mostly contractual language at that point. But I understand why you're asking because it's been a past issue.
Just trying to make sure we
Yeah. Let's not-
safeguard against missteps in the future.
Right, right. Okay, any other questions or concerns from the group? I'd like to keep this moving if possible.
Yeah, I'll say, you know, this is super helpful feedback. I think the overarching policy dynamics of understanding that this body is happy to see that this option is back in the overarching policy. I do appreciate the feedback on just that interplay between the policy and the contract. If, you know, maybe we look at, is there a way to do a recommendation that also just says pending any final changes? Because I think what can happen is we can publish this version in the annual action plan as it is right now, because we're going to be putting that annual action plan out for public comment. Knowing that there is still some things that will likely change, because I need to give that space for legal review and also just to test and make sure that it tracks with how we're wanting to make these changes. But if this body wants to go ahead and give us, I mean, maybe it's a recommendation that says move to approve subject to final version, and again, that will be, we can update that in the annual action plan as well. That final submission to HUD is in the early part of August. So I'm quite certain that we can have an updated and final version to submit to HUD with the annual action plan, but perhaps we can do some kind of provisional recommendation today. I'll just offer that up as a way to keep moving.
And unfortunately, even as much as I'm like urging us to do this, I've heard from MHO now, and there are some substantial, use the word substantial changes that they would have to see in that language for them to restart a program. And since we're hoping that they will, perhaps we need to actually step back, absorb this for a minute, hear from them, and rally this committee again, unfortunately. I hate to say that, but I don't want, I mean, we know that MHO is one of our target users in the communities to do this and deploy this program and as an applicant. So I would hate for us to adopt something and then have to undo it. So I'm actually going to recommend that we hear from the parties that are listening in right now for some of their potential changes. If you all have any, I think we had some good feedback just now. If anything else comes up, we're going to ask that you send it to myself or Nikki or both. And then we probably will have to convene you again for a quick vote for us to get it. Sorry, Nikki, but I just heard from them. Yeah, better safe than sorry on this one, I think. And I'm hearing thank you from them, so that's good. Okay, so sorry about that, but good input. And if you didn't get a chance to review it, please do review it. If you have any questions, there are no dumb questions. Like one of the ones I had was making sure recapture funds got used appropriately and how would that be defined? So ask all the questions you have. We'll reconvene you, I guess, over email. It'll probably be for just this one item.
That's right.
Do a Google Meet real quick, probably on a Tuesday again or a Monday again. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on this particular item before I move us on to the next one? Which is really just comment. Okay. I got us all excited. Sorry. Go ahead, Karen. Karen, you might be muted.
I apologize. I need to jump off at this time.
Thank
I
you.
have another meeting that I have to run to.
Yep. We're going to be wrapping up too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Okay, everyone, that concludes item number 3 on our agenda. Item number 4 is public comment. Is Sophia helping? Who's our person on the phones today? Do we have any public comment, Lori?
We do not have any public comment.
Okay, no public comment. Okay, then we have Completed item 4 and number 5 is just adjourning. So we have resolved all of our items today. I will be in touch via email about a follow-up Google Meet meeting just to discuss this draft language. Please do review it. Make sure you get all your questions or concerns aired so we can move forward next time. Thank you, everybody, for your time today, and nice to see you all virtually. We are adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.